Jeff Ogilvy survives Wingfoot.
Now the moment Aaron Badley has waited for.
Gary Webb is the 5-time Australian Open champion.
Golf at its best by one of the best in golf, Peter Thompson.
Stand in front of a crowd like this today and win the PGA Championship is pretty special.
He's done it at last. Greg Norman.
Matt Jones gets his name on the Stonehaven Cup.
Leishman to 11 under. Now we've got a new leader, kids.
There it is, Adam Scott, a life changer.
Coming up next, you have unrestricted access to golf across Australia and the world. Thanks to Golf Australia, we're going inside the ropes. Subscribe now on iTunes or your favourite podcast app, or head to golf.org.au.
Hello everybody and welcome to Inside the Ropes, episode number 39. Yes, you can tell already we've lost our perhaps key contributor, Andy Maher, on the sidelines, I believe, as I introduce my co-host today, Martin Blake, and of course the inimitable Mike Clayton. That Andy might have suffered, boys, a bit of post-Masters letdown.
Well, I'm filling in for him, Hayesy, and I suppose I should feel sorry for him, but I don't really, because this could be a big career moment for me. What about the front bar this week? Am I up for that? Or
Oh, you've got to be a chance.
I wouldn't mind. That's a funny show, that.
It is. I heard they were contemplating Limo, so if you can perhaps...
Well, we know what you think about Limo, so...
if you can get in front of Limo, maybe you are.
This could be a big moment for me. Well, Andy, I mean, he works a lot, doesn't he? I mean, he's got the radio show, he's got the front bar, he's got this famous podcast. I mean...
About 4 other podcasts.
No wonder he's run out of voice. Is that what's happened to him? He's
not unwell, apparently, but he's literally lost his voice. He cannot speak. Feels 100%, just minus a voice, which I know that sorry, Andy, but a lot of people are probably happy with that. No, that's very unfair. Clayts, welcome.
Thanks, Hayesy.
I know this has been a long time coming. This is one of our favourite segments, is Ask Us Anything. Really, it's Ask Clayts Anything, because Blakey and I will just sit back
stepping
and
aside.
Yeah, just let Clayts have the reins for a while. For those who were on Twitter the other night when we actually launched this segment, Ask Us Anything this week, and encouraged everyone to ring in or to write in and ask us anything about the great game of golf. Clayts suddenly decided he'd start answering questions on Twitter on Monday night. It was a phenomenal achievement, Clayts.
Yeah, well, it probably wasn't a great idea anyway. At least there's no question about dropping out of Sandfield divots here, which is
it's a step up.
That's my pet hate. There was a players' meeting in America once, and Greg Norman stood up and suggested that tour players be given drops out of Sandfield divots. And Fred Couples stood up and said, "Hey, Greg," he said, "we've all got our names on our bag." He said, "Put it back in your stance and punch it out."
Well, we're going to try and punch out of a few of the holes that the listeners have created for us today. You're front and centre, Clayts. We're going to do that probably in segment 2. So just, steel yourself, brace yourself, bring your best, put your best foot forward perhaps in the second segment. But first of all, just a couple of key matters in golf this week. We're back. Thanks everyone for tuning into our podcast last week. Andy and I did from Augusta National, and the week before, obviously, we were there calling it for SEN in particular in Melbourne, and on a few live streams. It was an amazing time to be there, and I think it'll go down as one of the more memorable Masters, especially in a non-Australian sense. It had everything pretty much going for it, Blakey. I'd be interested just in the wash-up to some of the things that you thought about what happened at Augusta National.
Yeah, well, Patrick Reed's, he's, whatever you think about him, he's interesting, isn't he? He's quite a good player to watch. He shapes the ball
Very
a
good
lot.
player.
He's tough as nails, and people don't like him. So he's interesting in every way. Clayts, I'd be interested to know what you thought about the Alan Shipnuck article was written the day that he won the Masters, which where Alan Shipnuck, who's a very well-known American journalist, works for golf.com, and I'd urge our listeners to see if they can grab this article. He went and spoke to the parents of Patrick Reed, who, of course, live in Augusta, within about 2 Ks of the course, I believe. And I looked at that, and it was a very well-constructed article, I thought. And to me, that was good journalism. That was just they were having a Masters party with a lot of their friends over, and they were watching their son win the green jacket, but they weren't allowed to go to the course. So it's quite extraordinary. So to me, I reckon just go to the heart of the matter. deal with it in a sensitive and sensible way. It is what it is, and I thought it was great. But a few people thought it was a horrible article because it kind of downplayed his achievement. That was, what some people thought, particularly on Twitter.
Yeah, I thought it was perfectly sensible. I didn't see why there was a problem at all writing that article. Well, the interesting thing I thought came out of it was they'd gone to his parents had gone to watch him at the Open at
US
Pinehurst.
Open. Yep.
And I think his wife had complained they were there, and the USJ had them removed from the course. I mean, how can that happen? How can you remove someone from a golf course?
Yeah, on what basis?
What's that about?
I think her claim was that they were off-putting to his chances.
Well, that doesn't. Well, go watch someone else. But how can you take them off the golf course? I mean, it's a kind of free world, and they bought a ticket. And how can you get someone? You can maybe ask them to leave, but I'm not sure how you could force them to leave.
Well, I think the USGA would maintain control over all ticketed people. They could ask you to leave for whatever reason, as unjust or just as it may appear to the rest of the world.
If you bought a ticket, you bought a ticket.
Being in the States, it'd be interesting if they took some legal action over that. It's one they didn't sue over it because, if they weren't using a mobile phone or causing a disturbance, then,
So Andy and I copped a bit of stick from a few quarters about highlighting the plight, the personal plight of Patrick Reed, perhaps to a greater extent than other media outlets did during the call and after the call subsequently in the podcast. I'm interested to know what you two both think about how CBS handled it, which was, I'm not going to say that they were told that they couldn't, but you might want to go there, but there was no mention of the drama unfolding at all, and I think that's it's a big hole in a journalistic sense that you ignore one of the key stories developing on the day of a major championship.
Yeah, journalistically, you have to mention it. It's part of the deal. It's his greatest moment as a player, and his parents aren't there, and the whole build-up, the whole the shunning of him by other pro players because of maybe he was involved in some cheating earlier in his career, or that was the allegation. It has to be mentioned.
But CBS is not journalism at the Masters. CBS is they're cheerleaders for Augusta, and they have a 1-year contract, and if they say the wrong thing, they're out, and which is the threat. So there's never anything. No one ever says a critical word of anything at Augusta. No, there's not one hint from the commentators, even for golf shots. Mm. You'll never hear anyone say, "Well, he choked there," or "That was a terrible shot," or it was just. It's all very squeaky clean and very as they like it, and no one was ever going to bring up the family thing. I mean, it was just the skeleton in the closet, really. But
do you like that, Clayts, or no?
Well, no. It's I mean, here are the ones who would all be supporting the right of the First Amendment in America, but when it comes to their own tournament, they want it strictly controlled. Mm. It's Peter Thompson said, it's the greatest con job in sports. But look, the Masters is a great event, but I think Bobby Jones would be horrified to think that people were putting it on the same level as either the US Open or the British Open or the Open Championship.
Well, it was originally called the Augusta Invitational Tournament, wasn't it? And he originally hated it and declined and wouldn't let them use the expression Masters because he thought it was pretentious or
But it's become almost the number one tournament in the world, which I think is not its place at all. I think it's the National Opens of America and Britain are the two, and should always be the major tournaments in the world. Championships.
Yeah, and I disagree. I know you've written a great story. It's going up on golf.org.au this morning that contains your thoughts on that. I disagree. I think it's almost on equal footing with the Open Championship, the British Open.
Well, it is now, but I don't. I mean, I heard on somewhere on the telecast that this is the best tournament in the world. Well, certainly not better than the other two. I mean, maybe it's equal, but it's certainly not better. But I think a lot of people would think it's the most important tournament in the world now.
I think part of it is because, Clayts, of the Australian struggle at Augusta up until Adam Scott won in 2013, and the heartbreak of people here watching Greg fall over all the time. So that kind of added to the mystique. The other aspect, I think, is the greatness of the course, which adds to the quality of the tournament, and the fact that it's there every year. So every time someone hits onto a particular mound, or someone chips from the right-hand side of number 11 green, you know that's the Larry Myers area. Or if you hit it right on number 12, you know how did Fred Couples stay up there? It kind of the fact that it's in the same spot every year, it does add to it.
Or detract from it. I think the great thing about the Open
the rotational.
that they move around.
Yeah.
The great thing about the Open is it goes to all the great links in Britain, and same with the US Open. It goes to lots of not that they set them up that well necessarily, but they go to all the great courses in America. Whereas you're going back to the same place every year.
I just think that from my perspective, if you're a 12-year-old, in this instance, boy on a practice screen at any course in Australia, you're now looking to win the Masters. You have that 3-foot putt against your mate to win the Masters, and once upon a time that was the Open, and now I think it's the Masters.
My question is, what would Bobby Jones think of that? I think Bobby Jones, I don't think he would approve of that. I think he would say no, that they must always be the most important tournaments.
Fascinating. And look, we could talk around this all day.
Yeah.
Something else, Clayton, this really riles me, so I'll be fascinated to hear your view about, and Bobby Jones would be horrified with what we've seen this week come out of a caddy on the American USPGA Tour.
I don't think Bobby Jones would care about what came out of a caddy.
No, that's true. But he wouldn't like the insular views of American players. Look, the Tour left Augusta National and went up the road to Hilton Head to play the Heritage Classic. A great event in its own right. Had a great leaderboard for quite a while. And I think in American eyes, it sort of dwindled a little bit on the Sunday afternoon when Siwoo Kim and Satoshi Kodaira from Japan had a bit of a shootout and ended up going to a playoff hole. And on the third hole, Kodaira actually saluted with a birdie for his first win on the USPGA Tour. Hadn't been a member previously, gets to take up membership now. He's quite a decorated player, Blakey, isn't he, Kodaira?
I think he's
won
6 times in Japan, which is not an easy thing to do.
No.
There's a lot of money on the Japanese tour, and it's a very high quality tour.
Yeah.
So
Why, any time, which is going to get to the point of what the caddy said, that any time you're playing at home, you're a dangerous player. I mean, you play Japanese guys in Japan, they're great at home. Yeah. They're not that well, they're not that great at playing overseas, but boy, they're tough to beat at home.
Which partly brings us to the point here now, and why this is maintaining such a prominent position perhaps inside the ropes this week is Kip Henley, who's the looper for Austin Cook, the caddy for Austin Cook, who's a outstanding up-and-coming young player, and we might talk about him a little bit more in a second, but Kip Henley, who's his caddy, took to Twitter after the result and quote said, "I've never heard of Satoshi Kodaira before this week, and obviously he's a stud with the current world rankings process. I'm sure he's top 10 in the world now." Now, on face value, you think, "Oh, that's just a really pathetic American, typically naive thing to say." I looked into it a little bit more, and what I actually think he was trying to say is it's a flaw in the process. In subsequent discussion, he's referring to the flaws of the power of victory as opposed to a whole series of consistent results. And I thought, okay, well, I don't agree with him, but fair enough, he makes a point. Then he goes on and explains it, and it becomes this xenophobic, myopic, pathetic American dribble that we're so unfortunately accustomed to, Blake. He's just tipped a bucket on everything that happens outside the United States.
Yeah, who were the players who were talking along these lines last year? I can't remember.
Grayson Murray was the whipping boy for that. The boy we all kicked around for that. Well, he had that ridiculous. What he's just talking. What did he say? It's basically the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you think it's so easy in Europe, go to the tour school, mate. You can go and play over there if you want.
And got hammered. Look, Kodaira jumped from 46 to 27 by winning that tournament. He's got a ticket to play for 2 years. But I keep coming back to the fact that he's won 6 times in Japan. He was in the world match play, Hayesy, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he ranked 29th at the Masters. Clearly a player on the rise. And just because American players or American fans and caddies in this instance rather don't recognise him. Yeah. And maybe or maybe not pronounce his name very well, it doesn't give an excuse to tee off on his background. I mean, this Henley went on to say, I begged my guy long ago to go over there, meaning presumably just Asia generically, and spend 2 months mopping the floor and become a top 10 player in the world. But home, family, and the best run, he said ran, but best run tour on earth made it a no-go. So, tip a bucket on everything is Japan and Asia, and that's pathetic. And then in another comment, he said, they play for half the money at best, and it's for a reason. The best players in the world are here, in the immortal words of someone else. Case closed, end of discussion.
Yeah.
You got any thoughts, Clayts? I mean, it leaves me almost speechless that these guys can be so self-centered and detract from the global game. They play 49 weeks of the year on the US PGA Tour.
Yeah, what they never acknowledge is the advantage of the home ground they have every week. I mean, Americans go, they play at home every week. That they can fly to their home every weekend if they want after the tournament. They never acknowledge that guys from, Jeff Ogilvy and Adam Scott and all the guys who play in Europe pick up from Australia, fly over to the rest of the world, buy a house, live over there, and play on the other side of the world for their whole career. They never acknowledge that they would never do that.
Mm.
Yeah, I heard Gary Player speak about this
How
once.
difficult that is to upend your whole world, live on the other side of the world in a place you mightn't like. I mean, it might come as a surprise to some Americans that not everyone thinks it's the greatest country in the world.
Yeah, I spoke to Jeff Ogilvy one year when he came home to play in Melbourne, and he's obviously in his hometown, and he said, "Oh, it's great to be home where the pies are hot and the beer's cold."
Yeah. So these Americans think that. What they never acknowledge is that they're playing a home game every week, and perhaps if they went to Europe and they actually wouldn't wipe the floor. I mean, go to take the American tour and stick them in Calcutta for a week. See how they go there. I mean, half of them wouldn't get to the first tee. They'd be shitting and spewing in the toilet for the whole week. But it's not that easy playing away from home. But they as I said, they've never ever acknowledged it. I guarantee it's never entered their head that it's actually not that easy to go the other side of the world and play professional golf.
I'll attest to that. The dietary requirements of being in the United States are very taxing. I've put on
Pepsi.
5 kilos over there this week. It was a disgrace.
I must say, last time I went to Augusta National, I reckon I broke the world record for hot dogs in a week. The hot dogs in the press box, unbelievable. Not to mention those big jugs of beer that they have in the press box. In the press box, they got beer.
But I mean, caddies. Well, not caddies, but there's some great players in Europe. I mean, there are great players everywhere now.
There are. And phenomenal players across Asia and all the different tours in Asia. China and Japan on the Asian tour. The depth in Asia is greater than it's ever been.
And it's changed a bit now. But 10 years ago, there was who was the better player, Ernie or Phil? And Mickelson at that point had never won outside of America. Maybe he'd won one tournament outside of America. And Ernie had won all over the world. He'd won at Royal Melbourne, he'd won at Wentworth, he'd won in South Africa, he'd won all over the world. Well, how can you possibly compare these guys?
Yeah,
I mean, one guy's proven himself to be a great American player, and one guy's proven himself to be a great player in America and a great player all over the world in all sorts of conditions. Not to say that, Mickelson probably, if he'd played more overseas, he would have won more overseas, but Ernie had proved that he was a great player on every type of golf course. He won the Open Championship. He won all over the place. And Mickelson had only won in America. Well, how can you compare these two guys?
Yeah.
But if you had that discussion with an American, I'd think you were crazy. And they wouldn't even, half of them wouldn't even get the point that it takes an extra dimension of skill to be able to go to Royal Melbourne, turn up at Royal Melbourne on Tuesday and win the tournament 5 days later on greens that are rock hard and fast and then go to Muirfield and win the Open over there and then go to South Africa and win on the soft, slow Kikuyu down there. And I mean, Ernie was an incredible player, and the same as Gary Player. Guys like Graham Marsh, who won Tom Peter Thompson, won all over the world.
And so I want to differentiate. I want to make sure that we know that this is Kip Henley, the caddy, doing this, and not Austin Cook. Austin Cook, I love him. He's only missed 2 cuts in his debut PGA Tour season this year from 14 starts. He won the RSM Classic, which is one at Seabird Island the week before the Australian Open. He started on the wrong side of 400 in 2017, his world ranking, and he's up to, where is he now, 107, I believe, 109th. And he's had a whole string of great results, and he's a leading rookie in the FedEx Cup points this year. And I hope very strongly that we see him at the Australian Open this year. So he'll get the chance to sort of put his caddy's claims to the test anyhow, Clayts.
Well, the other thing about the rankings is, aside from being in the top 50 is a big deal because you get in the majors, who cares about the rankings anyway? I mean they don't control anything. Or they're a construct of, well, they were a construct of IMG and Sony when they started out. It was an advertising vehicle. So who cares about the rankings, really? I mean, the only rankings to golf pros that matter are where you are on the main list.
Yeah, they
so
count.
The world ranking is an artificial construct of, I mean, how do you compare players who never play against each other?
Yeah. But they do count 4 times a year for the
Well,
majors.
for the top 50, 4 times the majors. But that's it. I mean, someone's a top. I mean, and they matter for contracts. Like
Endorsements.
players get paid according to where they're ranked. But
Yeah.
I mean, why are the world rankings such a big deal? No one cares about him anyway.
Anyway, Austin Cook, love him.
Yeah.
Kip Henley, sorry, mate, but pull your head out of your
I wouldn't
date.
think a Jordan Speed, if we went and asked him, he wouldn't be down that track, would he?
No, not
Yeah.
at all. And
The
I
top
trust that Austin
players-
Cook isn't either.
No. It's
and-
a caddy at the end of the day.
You know, and I've mentioned this the guy's name before on this podcast, Kenny Perry. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts on him were, Clayts, but he's the antithesis of Ernie Els. I mean,
Yeah.
refused to go and play the British Open. It's a disgrace. You cannot claim to be an elite world player if you only ever play in the 48 continental
No, you
US
can, you can
states.
claim to be an elite American player, but
Yeah.
to be a world-class player, by definition, I would have thought you have to play around the world. You have to have proved that you can pick your bag up, throw it on a aeroplane, fly across the other side of the world and play well. And I mean, Gary Player was the ultimate. I mean, that amazing story he told on the pod last year about leaving Paris on Monday night or Tuesday morning,
Come into Perth.
coming Paris, New York, LA, Hawaii, New Zealand, Sydney, Melbourne, arrived at 10 o'clock at Royal Melbourne on Thursday morning and won the Australian Open by 7 shots.
Yeah, breathtaking.
I mean, that's what being a great player is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not flying from Kentucky to Georgia and winning a tournament.
It's a long way from Kentucky to Georgia, Clayts. Anyway, one
Stop
player
at all
who,
those IHOPs on all the way and put on 4 pounds on the road trip.
one player who we can't ever accuse of not knowing where the airports are is Brooke Henderson. And before we head towards Ask Us Anything and Clayts really fires up, we've got to give due deference here to the Canadian 20-year-old who this week, Blakey, won her 6th LPGA Tour event at the ripe age, as I said, of 20. And she is one of the truly global players. Another phenomenal achievement. She didn't lead after the first round, but from then on was pretty much wire to wire.
And gives it a huge belt with that unbelievable swing. I remember a couple of years ago at the Grange in Adelaide watching her play in the Women's Australian Open, and we hadn't seen her before. Hayesy and I went out to watch her. We couldn't believe the club was almost touching the ground on the other side. And we stepped out one of her drives. I don't know whether you remember this, Hayesy. Downwind on the 18th hole at Grange. Might have even been in the last round of that.
Yeah, it was.
Open.
Yeah.
And we stepped it out at 290. Yeah. So
Well, she played with Sue. Oh, I came for Sue that day.
Yeah.
They made one bogey between them. Sue bogeyed the 11th, shot 68. Brooke shot 67. Yeah, she's a tremendous player and fun to watch, interesting to watch. And
sister's a pro and carries the bag for us, so she's an excellent player as well.
she plays every week and goes all around the world. And, I mean, she's the ultimate.
Yeah.
Exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
She goes all over the world and plays well all over the world, and great fun to watch.
Well, John Rahm, Hayesy, went back to his native Spain. I mean, he's based in America nowadays, of course, and went to college there, but he went back and won the Open d'Espagne as well on the weekend. So there's another guy that, gets on the plane and goes. And that, Clayts, that would always be a big deal for a player to win his national Open, wherever you are from. And that was the first time that he'd won the Spanish Open. So, great player.
I don't think there was a Spanish Open until 8 weeks ago. They cobbled together something on a dreadful golf course by the look of it. But
yeah,
the amazing thing about the European Tour is I think I'm right in saying there's no German Open, and there hasn't been for a while. And there wasn't a Spanish Open for a few years either, which is staggering, really.
Yeah, it is. I don't think it's going to be the last one he wins, just quietly.
Oh, no.
No, he'll be number one in the world in short time, I would think.
Brett Rumford finished tied 5th there, Hayesy, which was a good result for Rummy, who's showing a bit of form at the moment.
Yeah, well, he didn't have the greatest of summers domestically this year, and you're reluctant to write Rummy off because he just seems to bob up and just prove to you that his best is still, capable of doing this. He could have won that tournament, actually. Didn't have a great final round and still wasn't too far off the pace of Johnny Rahm, only 3 shots back in the final analysis.
One thing I wanted to mention to you is that the Texas Open is on this week in San Antonio. And I just looked at this yesterday because we often talk about the Australian Open and the Australian PGA and all our tournaments about how do we get the best players to come and play here, and clearly it's quite difficult. But the Texas Open this week's worth $6 million US, and they've got one of the top 10 players, and that's number 10, Sergio Garcia. So the point I wanted to make was it's not just about increasing the prize money. It has to be at the right time. So right at the moment, the players are between majors. The Players' Championship's about 3 or 4 weeks away. They're in a lull, and most of them are taking a break. So I just thought that was worth mentioning, that you can put $6 million up US. I mean, that's 4 times what we put up for our tournaments here, but you're still not guaranteed to get best players. And in actual fact, even the World Golf Championship events, a few of the top players skip some of those as well.
Was that?
And they're $8 million.
Aside from the events that double up against the majors, $6 million is one of their smallest tournaments, I assume, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's a minimum. That's a minimum number.
And we could. What's the prize money for the Australian Open? 1.5 million.
Yeah.
So, but we could put up $8 million and get. You wouldn't. It wouldn't change the entry list one dot.
Correct.
Unless you started. So you might as well put up 1.5 and put $7 million into appearance money, because you would get a better field, which shows how these guys get paid far too much money. And
it's hard to think. It's hard to really comprehend that you could put on a $6 million tournament and not garner one shred of interest from the average player.
Well, there's no one there apart from Sergio who would move the needle. I mean, Tiger's not playing. It's interesting. Scotty's playing, which we were talking about the rankings before. Adam Scott is 59 in the world, so right at the moment he's not qualified for the US Open. The next major US Open?
Yeah.
So he's out there trying to play, which I think is probably good for Scotty. I mean, he's had that. He's had a few years of playing that limited schedule because he was good enough to do it, but now he has to really grind it out.
That's the problem with winning a big tournament, and obviously being good enough to win a big tournament. You go on the Tiger Woods schedule, and I think Jeff Ogilvy did the same thing. You decide you can play the limited schedule, but you got there because you played the maximum schedule. You're playing every week, and you played a lot of golf, and you get to be really good, and you don't have to play so much, but you've got to be careful your form doesn't slip according to the number of tournaments you're playing.
Well, we're going to be just like Tiger and take a quick break and come back on the other side of this little break.
Hi, this is Sherelle McMahon. Swing Fit is the fun, healthy, social way for women to get started in golf. You'll learn the basics of the golf swing and how to putt over a 6-week program, and get your whole body moving through yoga and Pilates-style exercises. You don't need any golf knowledge or equipment. Simply turn up in comfy clothing and get started. You'll be surrounded by like-minded people and receive constant support. So get outdoors, meet new friends, and learn a sport that you can play for the rest of your life. To find a program near you, visit swingfit.com.au.
Hey, it's Jeff Ogilvy. I can't be in Australia very often, but I love keeping up with everything on Inside the Ropes podcast. Good bunch of guys, and I love listening.
Well, welcome back in one of our time-honoured segments. Well, that might be going a little too far, but I'm sure it will become time-honoured in the course of the next couple of years, Clayts, because, Blakey, I should say too, because Clayts has made this his own. It's called #AskUsAnything, as we welcome our Facebook Live audience through Golf Australia's Facebook page. Clayt's got to give everyone a wave there and a salute. This is where Clayts really comes into his own, Blakey. Like, we almost need to step aside. Before I get your answer, just let me remind people that they can subscribe to the Inside the Ropes podcast through Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your favourite podcasts. We always encourage people to leave 5-star reviews, Blakey. We don't want any of this 2- and 3-star sort of rubbish. And we've got a couple of beauties, and it brings us up to 88 5-star reviews, and we'd love to push that towards 100 in the coming weeks. If you're enjoying the show, we'd really appreciate it if you could review it on iTunes. That includes all you guys out there on Facebook. This helps more people like you discover what we're talking about every week. And we've got a couple of really interesting reviews this week, Blakey.
Yeah, Dean from Moonee Ponds really liked the Bryden McPherson interview, which a lot of people liked, actually. Listening to Bryden for McPherson, and really enjoyed his openness to Loire more than just the physical side of golf, and seek to make gains with the mental side. On the other hand, I wonder what Bryson DeChambeau would think of this, and similarly, what Bryden would think of his scientific approach. Do they know each other? Perhaps you could ask them next time he's on. Really enjoy the show. Keep up the good work, Dean and Moonee Ponds. And we've got hills here.
This next one from Towners, I mean, this is music to our ears.
After being a member of the Matt Cutler fan club for a number of years, it is great to finally hear some of his insights on Inside the Ropes. Great that we no longer need to wait for Australian Open radio now. And for those people who are listening who don't know, Matty Cutler is our head of high performance at Golf Australia. Is that right?
Oh, a
and he's a
high-performance manager.
budding media superstar.
Oh, I think he sees himself as the next Andy Maher. So, perhaps he could have been sitting in this seat today because he's got his eyes on the front bar and several
He's
Carlton
probably
podcasts.
in therapy because I'm here.
He might well be, actually. But we encourage people to pick up the Matt Cutler fan club on Twitter. He's a big fan of that, Matty. So, yeah, get on board. Thank you both to Towners and to Dean for their reviews, and keep sending them in. We'll read them out as they come in, especially the 5-star, or only the 5-star ones, really. We're not worried about the rest of them, so the rest of you can bugger off. Anyway, here it is, the moment that Clayts has been waiting for. As I said earlier, he couldn't even wait. Monday night, he started cranking out the responses on Twitter when we launched this. One of your more bizarre performances, Clayts, I believe, to do that.
Oh, well, pre-answering the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, not good. Yeah.
Did it occur to you at any stage that might have been an issue?
That's probably actually not. Well, I didn't think we'd probably get to them all, but hopefully we get to them all.
I must say, there's a lot of questions. We are getting feedback in this little segment.
It is, and we've got a lot more this morning that probably may not get read. Well, we try to get to a few, and as you said, we're on Facebook Live now through Golf Australia. I encourage you to drop some questions in, and we will try and get a couple live ones here. Anything to do with my fashion will be dismissed summarily, bludgeoned over the side screen.
I'm a bit concerned this little bun that one of my bosses has brought me from Augusta is sitting on the desk while I'm... I'm hoping they're not filming that.
This could be an issue for you. Anyway, let's go, Clayts. This is, we stop beating around the bush. Ask us anything. From Anita Blinko, who's a long-time listener to the podcast. Are the red tees taken into account when designing or rating a course? Some of the top 100 in Australia might be great off the blacks, but are boring as the Commonwealth Games closing ceremony off the reds. Now, that's a big slap.
They get taken into account more, I think, now when we're designing a course. You kind of put more of a effort into where the women's tees are going. One of the problems is, for example, if you build a long par 4 for men that's a par 5 for the women, is how do you make it interesting for the women? Because it's, you don't necessarily want to put a hat. I mean, the making of a great par 5 often is a bunker 30 or 40 yards short of the green, which you don't necessarily want to build on a difficult par 4. But if you don't build it, then it becomes a less interesting par 5 for the women. But, I mean, part of the problem is that we play so much competition golf here. That if you're a good player, go play off the men's tees. I mean, I play with some girls at Metro who are good players, and we just play off the men's tees. And the course for them, because they're good players, becomes much more interesting. So women's courses are generally, it's not fair. I like to kind of joke they're kind of grandmother's courses, really. They're set up for very short hitting, and they're very playable for the majority of women. But if you can play, I caddied in the women's pennant for Michelle Huey, who plays for Metro on Sunday at Commonwealth. And the courses are ridiculously short for her. I mean, she's a good player. And there were a couple of holes into the wind that I thought, the third's going to be really tough. We teed off the 10th. And you get to the third hole, it was a driving us 8-iron because the tee's 100 yards forward from where we play it. So what's a tough hole for the men becomes a pretty easy hole for someone who plays as well as she does. So the courses that for good players, for good women players, and I've been banging on about it with Trevor Herden for years, is that they're way too short if you're a good player. Yeah. So my suggestion would be go play golf for fun and play off the men's tees if you find that more interesting.
Yeah. So when we go to the Women's Australian Open, Trevor will have the tees back. Say on a par 4, he's going to be 360, aren't they? 350, 360 par 4s.
Which is way too short. I mean,
that's metres, I mean.
Yeah, I've played a lot with obviously Sue O. Sue hits the ball as far as I do or further. And, I mean, the courses are... I mean, Tom Watson, my friend who caddied for so young, you for so long, LPGA, lob wedge, pitching wedge, gap wedge, all day tour, he called it, LPGA. And it's, I think women's golf has always been set up to protect the poorer players, to make the scores not so bad. And
we're better
I don't think it does them any favours either. I mean, Sue and Brooke Henderson, they can easily play in the summer when it's bouncing and the ball's going a long way, they can easily play a 7,000 yard golf course, a 6,400 yard golf course. And so, and if Anita's question was the ranking, as in not so much the slope rating, but where the courses sit on the top 100 in Australia rankings, then no, they're all ranked off the back tees.
Yeah, and also onto that point from Anita's question, if you're talking about, and I know that she would probably know this, the course rating itself is definitely done from all the respective tees. So if you're talking about course rankings and the Golf Digest or Golf Australia magazine rankings, I'm unfortunately sure also that they don't take that into account. But maybe that's something that we can look at. We're actually going to have a special in a few weeks' time with the people involved in putting those rankings together from the two magazines, Golf Australia magazine and Australian Golf Digest. Next time Clayts comes in for a bit more of banter, they're going to come in and talk about that. So maybe we put that to them.
But for me, the list, my off the top of my head, I don't think the list would change. Royal Melbourne's still going to be the best golf course, and whether you rank it off if you went and ranked every golf course in Australia, how it played off the women's tees, my guess is that the rankings wouldn't change one dot, because you're judging architecture ultimately.
Well, we did have 200 questions, but we just had to rope that down a bit now, probably about 100.
Quick, we'll be quicker now. Next.
Next one from Peter Robertson in Brisbane, who's another regular listener. Appreciate your feedback here, Peter. What format would you recommend for a version of golf, you guys, that would take 90 minutes or less for young players to take up and to get them interested or hooked on golf to compete with other weekend sports such as soccer, rugby, netball?
The very quick answer to that is just 9-hole golf. I think there should be more 9-hole courses. There's a few around, and I think it's fantastic just as an entry level for players. So that's what I would say.
I agree with the more 9-hole courses. I've got a bunch of friends who vehemently disagree with my opinion on this one, but I think there are a lot of pretty average to bad 18-hole courses that would be much better off for just
pick the best holes,
condensing into 9, but spending money on making the 9 holes much better than it already is. But most of my friends don't agree with that at all. We're talking about Albert Park. Well, Albert Park came up as a part of that discussion. And my view was, well, make it a great 9-hole course. But their argument is, well, it's really important to have 18-hole courses, and I don't know which is right and which is wrong. But clearly, if you're playing for 90 minutes, this was one of the questions I did. I answered on the way home. Was
you said just go out and play at your local golf.
Well, I was driving back from Metro. I dropped in there and played with John Kelly, my friend who won the Australian Amateur in 1979.
Took your crown.
I caddied for him, and he did. And we played 5 holes. We played 1, 2, 3, half of the 8th and the 9th.
Yeah.
And it took us. We teed off at 4:45, and it took us 45 minutes, and it's great fun. I mean, we had a great time.
And my point to this would be go and play some cross country golf. You and I and others talk on Twitter occasionally, Clayts, about holes that aren't holes. Go and play off the first tee and hit it to the 4th green, and go and then tee off the 5th and hit it to the 12th, wherever it is on whatever course, and make up your own little 4-hole course to fill out the 40 minutes you've got, because golf shouldn't be about 18 holes and 4-hour rounds. That's not what it was designed to be. Anyway, we got to keep moving here. Otherwise,
the next one, Hayesy?
No, we've actually got a question off from our Facebook live stream, Blakey, that I'm going to go to from Ian Fowler. I'll put it to you though. In an era when we're trying to attract people to the game, why alienate many already playing by banning long broomsticks?
By banning the broomsticks,
nothing like being put on the spot, is there?
The short answer to that is that it's an unfair advantage over the other players. So. That's the short answer. I mean, it's past us, isn't it? I mean, I know, but my nephew, who's quite a good player, single-figure player here in the Melbourne area, he had a bit of putting yips, and he tried the broomstick putter, so he can't use that anymore. But he's actually changed to left-handed putting, which he's a right-hander. The pro at his club said, why don't you putt left-handed? And at least he got rid of the yips, so he had to learn how to putt again, basically. But I think that there was an advantage there. I'm not a fan of the broomsticks.
Oh, I think the R&A and the USGA fell down completely in their responsibility when they let the driver get so big, when they let the ball get out of control. And I think my view is slightly different to that. I think that in the same view of the same line, the belly putter was going to take over golf. I think in 20 years the risk was that everyone was going to be using a belly putter. And the short putter would have been extincted. So I think it was important to make the traditional 36-inch putter an important part of golf. And if they hadn't done that, as I said, everyone would have been using the belly putter in 20 years.
Just need to sort out the driver head sizes. Clayts, here's another one. You've been taken hostage. You get to pick a 2 marker to make par or better on any hole at Augusta and again at Royal Melbourne. Par or better you live. Bogey or worse, it's curtains. Which holes do you choose?
At Augusta,
Augusta and Royal Melbourne.
I'll start off with Augusta, Clayts, and then you can throw in your 2 bobs worth. I think the 8th at Augusta is the one that's eminently achievable for any player. It's not a complex
water?
No water. There's no sand around the greens. It's not a complex second shot. There's space to work with, provided you don't tug one left all the way up the hole. And
Just don't go left. I would have thought 13 as well. 13 is basically a par 4 length with a creek in front. So you can bump it out there, you can bump it up there. And
I thought that,
as long as you can pitch it over the water.
Yeah, there's death at the creek and there's death in the azaleas. So I'm not sure I want to be hostage watching me play that.
Look, in the I looked this up yesterday. In the Masters, number 13 is the easiest hole.
A 2-marker. Well, a 2-marker can easily par 13 at Augusta.
Yeah. Because you just say, I'm going to lay it up.
Well, if you're playing safe, basically it's a 70-yard par 3 across a creek, and that's the easiest shot in the world.
And a big green to hit.
Yeah.
And on Royal Melbourne, you're going to have to help me out with a number of this hole, Clayts. It might be about the 9th on the East Course. It's par 5, sort of veering right. 10th on the East Course. I think that's by far, of the 36 holes there, the one that would provide least challenge in terms of par for a reasonable golfer.
Yeah, it's a great par 4 really now.
I was going to say 12 West, which is played as a par 4 for pros.
Let's call it a par 4.
Yeah. But as a par 5.
It's not a par 5. Let's call it a par 4 for the sake of the discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, a 2-marker. I mean, the second West is a
2 West.
Yeah.
2 West is easy to par. I mean, there are plenty of holes at Royal Melbourne that are easy to par.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll keep moving on. Thanks to Kevin Nolan of Melbourne for that question. From someone who calls himself Golf Bollocks, I don't, advocate such language very often, Blakey, but there's no doubt that Pro Tracer makes golf worth watching. Why can't broadcasters give it to us on every shot? Now, I might actually take up this answer myself, which is sorry for reading it and sounding so opinionated here. But
I don't know whether Andy would do that. Would he ask the question and then answer it?
It's
just a takeover.
I've got to find
Ali Whitaker, who's a well-known commentator and one of our co-hosts on this show, has come up with a number on this, hasn't she?
Yeah, that's the one. We're just trying to find that now.
Well, my understanding was that it was about 150K
a week. Yeah,
she's had shot tracer costed today by her TV friends, and it's $40,000 to $50,000 per week for a simple version of it. The American kit, which we see on television, costs around $150,000 per week or per event, I suppose, according to Ali's research. So I think, given the cost constraints on a lot of TV productions, that puts a bit of a handbrake on a few of these things.
It is good, isn't it? I mean, it's good to watch.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Yeah.
Is it a massive thing? Is it becoming a must-have?
It is. It is.
I've been watching those Masters YouTube tapes of the old Masters, and they didn't have it, and they're great to watch. I mean, is it really that much better than? I mean, look, it's good, but it's not. I think if you go back and watch the 1974 Masters, for example, the 75 Masters, it was pretty compelling stuff without Pro Tracer.
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure just off the top of my head whether the Mark Leishman big hook shot rope hook into the 15th on day 3 at Augusta was that
second
on
day?
Second day was that on Pro Tracer?
No,
I'm not sure it was, but you could still see the ball curve.
What a great shot that was! Wow,
the trees. Yeah. That was a career shot. Clayts, next Clayts. Why don't they make rangefinders legal on tour? That's from Phil Smith in WA. Why don't they make rangefinders legal on tour? This has been a big debate, hasn't it?
Well, because they all have yardage books, and if a caddy had a choice between a yardage book and a rangefinder, they would always go with the yardage book. Because a rangefinder just gives you the flag; it doesn't give you the front of the green, or it doesn't give you the tier in the green. Or
it can if you focus on it.
Yeah,
but it's hard to fire it at the lip of a green.
You won't
it's
get
flat.
For example, if you're playing the 18th at Augusta, it won't give you where the tier in how far it is up the tier or under the tier. And all the information's in a yardage book. And as Peter Dawson, the head of the R&A, once said, when people throw the it speeds up play argument, he says, well, how can it possibly speed up play when you have to wait until the flag goes in for the group ahead before you even start getting a yardage? So if caddies had a choice between one, I'd be happy if someone said, you can have a choice between a yardage book and a rangefinder, because no one would use a rangefinder. They would all go with the book.
Hayesy, in elite amateurs, what's the situation with rangefinders there?
It's a hard-carded alternative. They'll make a rule on it for each specific tournament. I don't think there's one that's hard and fast. I'm in favour of them to speed up play, purely to speed up play. Generally find that you're allowed to use rangefinders during the amateur events.
Yeah.
And I, if that helps people make decisions rather than walking up and down, especially when they haven't got a caddy, then I'm all for it. That's just my thought, and that'll never happen in the big tournaments. I don't foresee that. I desperately want to get rid of contour books on greens, Clayts, and I know that you.
Things.
I don't know where you draw
Well, of
the
course,
line.
Augusta don't allow them.
Well, they're shocking. They're horrible things.
No, they had them.
Did they?
Yeah, no. Andy and I, we spoke about it last week on the podcast. We went and watched Adam Scott.
All right.
And on the second hole in his fourth round, he had a 4-foot putt, which he should just knock in for breakfast.
Oh yeah.
And he did all his aim point stuff, and then came out and checked his contour book, and it just baffles me. But that's a whole different story, and we went there last week, so let's not do it again. Another question off Facebook Live here from Brad Clifton, a regular contributor, and I'm very grateful that he hasn't questioned my fashion, so thanks Brad.
Hello to Brad.
Another question for Mike. In light of the Australian cricket cheating debacle recently, have you ever seen anyone cheat on the golf course, and what did they do, and how did you address the situation?
I have. In Asia, I saw a player fudge a putt, move it 3 inches in front of his marker. Of course, he denied he did it, but
3 inches.
Yeah. We kind of had an argument, and he put it back. But
hang on. You kind of had an argument.
Yeah, I said, mate, put the ball back. What are you talking about? I said, put the ball in front of the coin there. Put it back where it was. But
how did that go down?
I've seen guys break rules, but not. There's a big difference between breaking rules and cheating. I think everyone's broken rules, but there's a massive difference between that and cheating, which is knowingly either breaking a rule or not taking a penalty when you are due one.
Well, how did that go down when you said put your ball back?
Well, he kind of ummed and ahed and put it back, but
was it an admission of guilt?
Absolutely. But John Huggan did an anonymous players survey in Europe a couple of years ago and asked 40 players if they'd ever seen anyone cheat in the golf course, and 38 said they had.
Wow.
On the tour.
Wow.
Have you ever played with anyone who didn't count all their shots?
No, not in a tournament. Well, no. Well, it depends if you're talking about
accidentally or deliberately.
No, not who said they had 4 when they had 5, and no one's ever done that. But that's a bit obvious. Well, VJ, I suppose, did in the Indonesian Open.
He did. Yeah.
I wasn't playing with him, but that was the famous story there where
he
made a 7
he was banned for a while, wasn't he? He was
allegedly made a 7 at the last hole at Pondok Indah in Jakarta, and changed his card to a 6 and to make the cut.
And
was suspended for it. Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that there's been a question over him for the duration of a stellar career, and that's why Patrick Reed's. People ask, well, let bygones be bygones, but that's exactly why it's not, because it's so frowned upon in golf. I'm staggered to hear that 38 out of 40 admitted to seeing cheating.
The problem with the cheating allegation is that Gordon Brand Jr. and Paul Way, who are two respected Ryder Cup players, played with Antonio Garrido in Madrid one year, and they called him for fudging the ball on the green, moving it in front of the marker. And in the end, it's even when it's 2 players' word against 1, the officials always, in the end, it's all it is.
Yeah, word.
And whilst everyone might have suspected that he would have done it because he had a reputation, you can't ever do anything. And the 2 famous cheating cases were Bobby Vevay, who was Gary Player's brother-in-law, and James Blaylock, who both essentially broke the South African PGA and the LPGA Tour when they went to court. And I mean, if O.J. Simpson got off, it's not very hard to get off a cheating allegation because it's always one person's word against the other. If there's no film of it, it's unprovable. And so pros tend not to go there because they just know that it isn't worth the fight.
I'd see a helicopter following a white Commodore up Beach Road or something on your way to Royal Melbourne one year, Clayts. That'd be gold. OJ style. Now, look, while we're on just some of the nuances of golf, there's a question from David Fawcett in Sydney. Will they ever consider a gimme rule conceding 6-inch putts or less in all forms of golf to save time?
No.
Well, they've already got it in match play, but haven't they? But no,
well,
not in stroke play. I mean, in stroke play, you've got to put the ball in the hole.
Okay. I think that's pretty unanimous, David. Sorry about that.
There'll be some some wildly varying, different interpretations of what 6 inches was.
Yeah, in so many aspects of life, Clayts.
Yeah.
Brett McKay in Canberra. Sorry about that. I know that's sort of working a bit blue for you. We've got our cameraman here, Justin, who's having a bit of a pup. Brett McKay in Canberra on another sort of point of interest in golf rather than a hard and fast rule. If you can mark your ball and reset it the way you want to on the green, why shouldn't you be allowed to do that on the fairway? Taking it further, surely preferred lies within a card width would make the game less intimidating for new players.
Well, there's probably a few players out there who take that
liberty,
take that anyway without it being legal, don't they?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I've heard Clayts, and I'm sure it won't take much to prompt him into this response, but talk about how the ball used to lie when they first played at St Andrews, and it's all about, in my mind, playing the ball as it lies.
Well, you can mark the ball on the green because you didn't used to be able to mark it originally, but they allowed players to mark it because there'd be dirt on the ball. You could clean the ball, and by definition, there are no lies on the green. The lies are all the same, but there's there used to be, not so much now. There was a wild variety of lies on a fairway, and part of the basic tenet of the game was play the ball as it lies. I mean, deal with all sorts of lies. I mean, it was never a game predicated on picking a lie.
Well, you mentioned sand-filled divots before, and I didn't mention it at the time, but Jeff Ogilvy won his US Open out of a sand-filled divot on the 72nd hole. I mean, imagine driving the ball down the fairway on the 72nd hole and you're in contention for your first major and you walk up and it's sitting in a bunch of sand, but he did it.
Let's get to a bit more of a contentious one, a current issue, which is, it won't be an issue currently, but it might be in about 350 days. From Marty Lynch in Goondiwindi in Queensland. Great place on the border there. Do you think anyone will turn up at the Masters Champions dinner next year, which is a not-so-subtle reference to Patrick Reed's victory?
Well, it might depend what he's serving for the Masters dinner.
It won't be humble pie.
No, good one, Hayesy.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Very nice. You're working well. No, they will. Of course they will. Who wouldn't turn up to that? Patrick Reed, interesting character. I sort of... I think we'll see some people turning up there, mate.
Do you think that someone may not turn up? That's probably more. I'm sure there's going to be the majority of people there. Do you think there's a chance that someone will go?
That's not going to happen because it will cause a kerfuffle and it will get out and it will cause a headline. So
no, they'll all be there.
Yeah.
Did they get $10,000 for turning up to the dinner?
It pays their expenses to go for the week. Yeah.
$10,000. They're short of a quid. Those blokes who've won the Masters. Did you know, Clayts? I read something on Twitter this week.
How do you know that?
Well, I don't know. That was a question. I was told that yesterday that they get $10,000 for turning up. Well, they're short of a quid.
Well, I don't know.
Well, this is why I'm going to tell you that they're not short of a quid. Jordan Spieth on Twitter this week, it was revealed that his average takeout, every time he's been to the Masters for the moment, he's taking out $892,000 US on average every time he tees it up at Augusta because of his great results. Jack Nicklaus in his entire Masters career, took out $894,000 US out of Augusta National. Isn't that just a bewildering statistic?
Yeah. If you go on the PGA Tour website of the United States, you can actually look up career earnings, and it's quite fascinating to look at. I had a look at it last year, and I think Spieth was... At the time, this is about a year ago, he was sort of number 25, and then you go work your way right down, and here's Jack Nicklaus.
Jack
here.
Nicklaus at $5.5 million.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to skip one forward because I'm going to come back to ask you the one that we're up to at the moment. But so skipping forward a question here, Clayts, for you because you've been too quiet for too long. Would courses like Barnbougle Dunes or Newcastle Golf Club benefit from riveted bunkers to contain shape and contents in the wind rather than have sand blown out and over the surrounds of the bunker? And that's from Scott Hayes in Brisbane.
No.
Did you leave all your best work on Monday night?
I like the way the bunkers at Barnbougle change, and the wind blows them around and they change shape, and every time you go there they've changed a little bit.
Don't even have to rake them, do you?
Well, you don't. I mean, it's very. He's true when it says there. It's very powdery, soft sand. But no, I think the bunkers look good at Barnbougle. I like the way. I haven't played Newcastle for years, but Newcastle's a very sandbelt sort of course. So I wouldn't have thought that was a candidate for revetting, which is but basically the question is, would you build small pot bunkers at Barnbougle? And I think no, the bunkers we built there that worked the best down there.
Would they look appropriate at Newcastle? Just from
No,
memory,
I think Newcastle's it's the closest thing to a sandbelt course outside of the sandbelt. So the style of bunkers there works really well.
Interesting. So for you, Blakey, a really interesting question from is that Foz Foster? How can we get more golf on free-to-air television?
I wonder whether he's talking about in Australia or whether he's talking about more generally. In Australia, Channel 7 show all our big golf tournaments. Now, okay, it might be nice for free-to-air to show something like the Vic Open or the Queensland Open, something like that. But in terms of, I can see what he's maybe saying is that the week-to-week PGA Tour, European PGA Tour, that sort of stuff tends to go to Fox, but that's just a reality, It's so for all sports that to get onto free to air, you need to be producing kind of ratings that footy, the footy codes produce in cricket. And if you're not in that league, then you're going to pay TV.
Yeah, if it wasn't for Fox, there wouldn't be any golf on TV.
Yeah.
So further to that question, another one from Nicole Goodfellow in Melbourne. Sorry, no, I've gone to the wrong person there. It's from Peter Robertson again in Brisbane. If you were tasked with convincing TV executives in Australia to invest in bringing the Golf Channel to Australia, what would it be? How would you go about it?
Yeah, interesting. The Golf Channel, would work beautifully on Foxtel just if they showed it exactly as it is. Like, I'm not sure whether Peter is talking about having an Australian Golf Channel or whether he's just introducing the Golf Channel that
I think he wants the feed from the United States. And my understanding of that is that there's a conflict between, because I think that's an NBC-related product, and there's a conflict between that and Fox.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that would prevent that from happening, because I'm sure it'd be well received here.
It would. It'd be popular.
Bound to be a market for it.
Yeah.
Clayts, another question from our live stream on Facebook for you, specifically from Matthew Wood. Clayts, what is the best way to push the idea of width and angles, not talking about trees, at my home club? We currently have a number of holes with tree line shoots, which are only a result of lack of tree maintenance.
Well, you've ultimately got to cut the trees down.
Simple as that?
Well, you've got to convince the people who have the power or the control over the golf course that golf's a more interesting game when it's wider and there's more space. If you just narrow a golf hole down to a tree line 30-yard wide hole, there are no options. It's just hit it between the tree line. So you've got to have a committee who embraces the concept of width and angles, which is what you're talking about. But the only way you can create angles and choices and strategy is to have a hole that's wide enough to create that. And if you've got a tree line 35 yards apart, you've got no chance to do that.
I was thinking of Clayts when I was watching Jordan Spieth tee off on the last day at Augusta, and he pulled his tee shot on the 18th in the funnel that goes through from the 18th tee and hit a branch and dropped down. And he was
how bad does that shot look? I mean, I know it always looks worse on TV than it does live or in person. But
well, it takes 150 metres off the golf ball.
It's just a ridiculous looking hole. That thing's so narrow.
The funnel,
And so's the seventh hole. I mean, Mackenzie would hate the seventh hole now if he saw it at Augusta. It's so narrow and so tight.
Well, the tee's way back, isn't it? And then they planted a lot of trees down the right.
But I mean, people joke about my view of trees and what we do to them, but
that was one of the questions I was going to ask. Do you have any trees in your backyard?
Yeah, we do, but not indigenous trees, which is worse. But it's a huge question for every golf course to ask about the role of trees in golf. And going back to the first question about rankings, the courses that have managed their trees the best and kept their trees as Harry Colt says, a part of the scenery, but not a part of the stage. Royal Melbourne, Kingston Heath, Barnbougle, New South Wales, they're wide and they've got space. The courses that don't manage trees and plant trees indiscriminately long after the course was designed are the ones that struggle for to get any ranking recognition. I played at Yarra Yarra in a swap day on Saturday, and Tom Doak's gone in there and ripped out hundreds of trees out of the front nine and completely transformed the fifth hole. Fifth hole is back to where Alec Russell would recognise it now. It's amazing how much better it is.
Speaking of Tom Doak, he's going to provide our next question, or part of our next question, Clayts. According to Paul Hastings, Tom Doak says that if Alistair Mackenzie had stopped by Woodlands for a cup of tea on the way home, it would be rated right up there next to Kingston Heath and Royal Melbourne. What do you think?
Well, it wouldn't be ranked next to Royal Melbourne and Kingston Heath, but it would be ranked in the next level. You know, sort of.
Is it not already?
Well, I think it is, yeah. I mean, I actually took Tom there the first time Doak went there. He'd done the confidential guide, and he hadn't included Woodlands in it because he'd been recommended. I think Tom Ramsey and Richie Benno told him which courses to go and see in Melbourne. And he went to all the famous courses and never went to Woodlands. So when he came out, we were on our way to Barnbougle for the first time together and said, let's go and see Woodlands. And the first hole at Woodlands is the least good hole on the course. And he walked up a second.
Not a bad hole, I don't reckon.
Not a bad hole,
Yeah.
but it's the if you're ranking them in quality, it'd be number 18.
Yeah.
And the second hole's a pretty good hole, and the third hole's a good hole, and the fourth hole's really good. And he got to the fifth hole and said, why hasn't anyone told me about this place? This is amazing. And we walked the whole place, and you know, he thought Woodlands was a tremendous, and it is a tremendous course.
And what's good about it, I think, is that it's very different. It's very quirky with the tiny little greens, and the fourth hole being the best example. You played at Hayesy, the fourth. It's a drivable par 4 with a tiny little tabletop green.
Yeah,
and if you get over to the side, you can chip it straight across the green.
With the same soil properties as its neighbours, but it's a totally different look of the course.
It is. It's different.
Which is fascinating
It's great.
to me.
It's great.
And the fourth is one of those greens that if you built it now, and I know this is true because we built the same green basically at the 13th at the Lakes.
Yes.
People would go crazy now if you built it, but because it's been there for 100 years, people have had time to realise what a great bit of architecture it is. You know, it's a tiny, I think the hole's maybe 250 metres maybe, but a brilliant hole. Because if you drive it up alongside the green, you're going crossways at it. And
it's really difficult from the side.
Yeah, the angles there are so subtle, and it's a brilliant use of angles. And
Well, next question here is from Nicole Goodfellow. I mentioned her name before. She's from Melbourne. It's a more fundamental question, I suppose, than course architecture. It's how and when will we see women's golf on air more, and better or equal prize money? When will golf exit the dark ages? I might take up a couple of the answers on this one.
Yeah.
The other day at Golf Australia office, we had a Vision 2025 meeting, the first full meeting of the steering committee. And I'm telling you, Nicole, we are trying desperately to rectify all the situations of inequity around women's golf. It's happening. I trust that you listen to this podcast, you see that we give equal airtime and discussion to as many female aspects of the game as we can, and we treat them equally and don't make any difference between them. I sat and listened the other day back to Pernilla Lindberg's interview that she gave us after the first major championship this year, the ANA. I thought it was absolutely stunning the way that she spoke with us, and anyone who doesn't see that and poo-poos us for running women's golf, I'm sorry, this is probably the wrong podcast for you. In terms of getting it on television, the Women's Australian Open and has always, in modern years anyhow, been on the ABC and is free and open to everyone. I know that it doesn't get on, the secondary tournaments don't garner as much. The Vic Open is a special. The podcast that Golf Victoria puts up is, absolutely, not podcast, it's a live stream, is absolutely fantastic. Some of the commentary there is outstanding. But yeah, we are trying to get to the point where this is not even a question that has to be raised.
Just in terms of the prize money, Hayesy, the Women's Australian Open is worth more than the Men's Australian Open, as I understand it. Yeah, that's right, isn't it?
Absolutely true. It's worth more than the Australian PGA Championship.
The Vic Open, the Oates Vic Open, is equal prize money for men and women.
Yeah.
It has been for a few years.
We're desperately trying to rectify these situations. And, Clayts was talking before about Fox. Fox being the home of golf to watch it. They give great coverage of the LPGA Tour as much as possible. Sometimes it gets bumped down the schedule, but that's just a simple matter of maths. As you come back from the PGA Tour, everyone's got to sort of I guess get in the line behind that one because it's clearly the most prominent and highly rated tour in the world. just about the money. There's only one tournament in Australia that's richer in a purse sense than the Women's Australian Open, and that's the Perth Super Sixes. So, we've taken a lot of steps. Stick with us for the ride, Nicole. I think we're heading in the right direction.
And in Japan, I think the women play more tournaments, but for the same amount of prize money. So it's pretty equal in Japan. And Korea, the women's tour in Korea is way bigger than the men's tour, much bigger, much more popular, much more prize money, more tournaments. So there are two pretty patriarchal places, really, in terms of. But the women's tours kill the men's. Well, the women's tour certainly is much bigger than the men's tour in Korea, and which is a commentary on how great their women players are, really. But in Japan, it's pretty. The women's tour is incredibly popular in Japan.
I think all three of us are on the same page here. That I love watching women's golf. You've done a lot of caddying. Watching top level women's golf is absolutely awesome, particularly for a poor player like me. I mean, to me, it's the length that they hit the ball it equates far more to what I'm doing as a 50-something man than watching Dustin Johnson blow it 380 yards. So and the precision as well of someone like a Lydia Ko, and we spoke about Brooke Henderson with the power before, as well as someone like Arya Jatanagarn. Awesome.
Couldn't agree with you more, Blakey. And I'm really surprised to learn that you're over 50, because I wasn't going to ask you this question, but now I've been sort of given a green light by your good self. And sorry, Clayts, but I think you might be in this category too. Prior to a comp round, what is a good realistic warm up routine for those over 50? How long should this warm up take? I currently have around 10 putts and chips only. Darren Blenkinsop from Melbourne sent in that question. I didn't realise, Blakey. I had no idea you were over 50.
Well, there's a little bit of grey here, mate. So, but if Darren thinks that he's going to play as a plus 50 guy on a couple of chips and 10 putts, you've definitely got to get out. I'd always hit, a few balls. I'm not going to go out and blast 50 balls and work through the clubs, but you've just got to get the body moving, Clayts. So, and it does take a little while. So, it's always worth, even if it's just in the net, just hit a few into the net just to get things moving a little bit.
When I play with your great mate Jeff Slattery and we play on Saturday mornings.
No warm-up. 0.
10 putts, no chips, 10 putts.
All right, okay.
I jog from the car to the first tee, Blakey.
You know warm-up?
Well, I'm not on the wrong side of 50.
What other game would you play that you don't warm up? I mean, would you go out and play a game of footy or cricket? If you're playing cricket, you'd go and hit a few. Surely, golf's no different.
No, I agree. I mean, especially if it doesn't apply to Clayts, because Clayts' swing is a bit more grooved than yours and mine. But for us choppers, we should definitely get out and make a few minutes to get the groove on. Stellar style, Clayts.
One of the at Riviera, they've got Chook Peter Fowler uses it a lot. One of those kind of winged training aid things you swing. Four big white wings on the end of a shaft. And it's all about wind resistance and air resistance. And Chook swings that for 15 minutes before he plays. And if you did that, you would never need to do anything more than that.
But he's one of the fittest 50-something guys in the world.
Chook is,
and hitting it further than he ever has. Yeah.
All right, and one last question, because we've got 1,000 questions on Facebook Live and also on Twitter. Best courses to play, Clayts. I mean, Blake and I might be able to offer a couple of things here, but this is best for you.
It's best outside. Outside the Open Championship rota. Is that right?
Yeah, best courses in the Scotland UK and Ireland, especially in Scotland and Ireland, outside the Open rota for people to go and have a hit at. And that's a question from Andrew Newell.
Oh, there are lots of them. Brora is great. Dornoch is great.
Matty Guyot said that on Twitter. He responded to Royal Dornoch.
Yeah.
What about Royal County Down?
Royal County Down. Well, yes, not.
Or
on
is
the
that in
rota.
the rota?
That's not on that rota. Yeah, Royal County. But we're talking about kind of second tier, for want of a better word, courses. There are so many brilliant courses in Scotland and Ireland, all over England. Woking and Sanedale and St George's Hill, all those great heathland courses.
What's the name of the course that first hosted the Open? Was it Prestwick?
Prestwick's
I'm told
amazing.
that's a cracker.
Prestwick's amazing. North Berwick is
Cinque Ports, Royal Cinque Ports.
There was a thing on Royal Cinque Ports. There was a thing on Golf Club Atlas, which is an architecture geeks website, and someone asked the question of what are the 10 courses you would go to see in Britain to advance your architectural knowledge, to learn about architecture. And Tom Doak came on and said the top 3 were St Andrews, which is obviously on the open roader, Prestwick and North Berwick. So Prestwick and North Berwick hark back to what the game, how it started out with blind shots and using the land. And
So fun to play.
Great, brilliant course. I mean, North Berwick's an amazing place.
And so for my 2, Bob, I'm going to throw in Panmure, which I think is
Panmure's great,
fantastic.
yeah.
And there's a course called Royal Montrose in a little town
Montrose
called,
is terrific, yeah.
on the way between St Andrews and Aberdeen up on that east coast. I think that's fantastic.
Played there with Huggy, yeah.
Just outside St Andrews, there's a place called Crail, where there's a beautiful course there with unbelievable views. And Kingsbarn's near there as well.
Kingsbarn's is good. I mean, Knott's in the middle of the country near Sherwood Forest is where Edwina Kennedy won the British Amateur a long time ago, 1977. Is a tremendous course. Woodhall Spa. I mean, England's full of great golf. I think it's the best country in the world for golf.
England or Scotland or Britain?
England. Well, the best single country is England for golf. It's amazing.
Ahead of Scotland?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Well, because there's more variety. I mean, there's great inland golf in Britain. Sorry, in England. There's very little great inland golf in Scotland. Gleneagles is pretty good, but well, the old courses at Gleneagles, not the Ryder Cup course, but the Kings and Queens courses at Gleneagles are terrific.
Yeah.
But England's got, as I said, lots of great inland golf as well as the links.
Awesome. We could probably talk about that a lot longer, but we need to take a break. Thanks to all our listeners on Facebook Live, or our viewers, I should say. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your questions and your feedback, especially that you haven't ripped our fashion sense. And on Twitter, it's been great. Sorry we've left out a lot of questions, but we just have run out of time for that. Clayts is just warming up too, which is a pity.
Send them to me. I'll answer them on Twitter after the show.
Yeah. Yeah, so was it Michael Clayto?
I don't know, 15.
19
or
15. There we go.
They'll find it.
Anyway, thanks so much for all your responses and questions, and we'll do that again later in the year. I know it's a very popular segment. For now, we'll just take a quick little break.
G'day, I'm My Golf Ambassador Jason Day. I'm really excited to be an ambassador for My Golf, Australian Golf's national junior program, jointly run by Golf Australia and the PGA. My Golf is every Aussie kid's first step on their golfing pathway. It's all about teaching children the basic skills of golf in a safe and healthy environment, and just as importantly, about the life skills that golf can teach you that distinguish our sport from the rest. Remember to visit mygolf.org.au for more information.
G'day guys, it's Brian Rossing here, and I'm a long lane from home, playing on the Latin America Tour and living in the US, but I keep up with all my Australian golf while listening to Inside the Ropes.
Welcome back to Inside the Ropes again. Thanks to everyone for their interaction with the Ask Us Anything segment. It's a very popular one, and we will bring it back. Presumably when Clayts makes another appearance again later in the year. He's a very popular man, Mike Clayton, on the podcast scene, doing quite a few of them around the traps now, Clayts. I don't know if that's in your contract with Inside the Ropes.
Doing a few too many. Yeah, anyway, it's too much fun.
No, it is good fun, and we do love talking about golf, and there are so many different issues to discuss. Among those is the Australian Junior Championships, which have been going on in Perth. They continue to go on. We're recording this on Wednesday morning, and the Boys Interstate Series is still in progress. We'll touch on that in a second, but firstly, wrapping up the events that have completed, huge congratulations to the West Australian girls team for wrapping up the girls series inside 2 days, which is quite remarkable. They did lose to New South Wales on the final day when there was nothing really at stake. It took I don't think it took any gloss at all off the result. Fantastic achievement by a young team, and the way those West Australian teams are coming together now is absolutely phenomenal.
What is it about the WA people?
The girls and boys from a very young age, like 14, 15, 16, start pushing each other in a team state sense, and they are really good friends around all the clubs that play top level pennant around the city of Perth. They are pushing each other not just at interstate series time, but through the year. And they're
right at the moment you've got
followed.
Curtis Luck, you've got Minjee Lee, you've got Hannah Green, just to name three off the top of my head. Young pros, outstanding.
Going places. And I was just about to say that one of the really key aspects of what's going on is Curtis and Hannah in particular, but Minjee to a lesser extent, and other people who have come through those ranks in the last few years, are constantly in contact with those coming through and congratulating them on their results, and they stay in touch. And it's a great fellowship, West Australian golf. And if you get to experience what they do, it's tremendous. And for a state that doesn't rock the population, particularly Victoria and New South Wales, and to a lesser extent Queensland, they've got a phenomenal record in these events, and I expect them to go really well in the senior interstate series coming up at Adelaide in a few weeks' time. So congratulations to the girls. On the boys' side of things, as I mentioned, still ongoing. There's rounds to play, 2 on Wednesday, 1 on Thursday till we get a winner or a half, as the case may be. But remarkably, there's still 5 teams in contention, 4 with 3 wins and a loss, and Victoria have 2 and 2 after 4 rounds of competition. So they could go anywhere around Australia, the boys. I still favour the WA combination. Queensland's in front on contests 1 at the moment, and on matches 1 at the moment. But I think Golf Western Australia could complete the double, which would be remarkable. Touching on the Australian Junior Championships, the individual ones the week before, again, just huge kudos to the WA crew. I know they're playing on home soil, but phenomenal. And the girls at Royal Perth, Madison Hinton-Tolshard, who's been sort of a rising, developing player for the last couple of years, really put it together and out-dueled Grace Kim, who's one of the winners of the Kari Webb Scholarship. So a phenomenal achievement from her, and she won the Australian Girls Junior Championship, gives her a right to play in the ISPS Hander Women's Australian Open in Adelaide in 2019, which is a great feat in itself, or a great reward. And on the men's side, I don't want to bring this up too much, Blakey, but I may have predicted this. I tipped this. Yeah, I tipped this. Mm-hmm. Connor Fuchs.
Left-hander, right?
Left-hander from Kalgoorlie, Clayts. He's got a history in golf, and his family is involved, and I met his dad at Karrinyup earlier this year. God, what a beautiful family they come from. And I know that you've got a bit more about his background.
Well, Sean Clues, who caddied for Sue O for a bit last year, caddied for Sandra Gull for 4 years, so Sean's been caddying on the LPGA Tour for a long time. I'm not sure who he's caddying for now. One of the Korean good players.
And they're related, right?
His uncle. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's amazing. Connor Fuchs, a really impressive, nice, good-speaking young fellow, shy, and remarkably 6 hours from the Perth metro area at Kalgoorlie to come out. He's the captain of the boys' interstate team. He's a really impressive young fella, and he won. There were 5 of the top 6, I want to say. Might even be 6 or 7, but let's go with 5 of 6. The top place getters from Western Australia. Again, Blakey, just reiterating what we said before, truly remarkable. And the only non-WA person at the pointy end of the leaderboard was Louis Dobbelaar, who we all have high hopes for from Queensland. Put his head up into the frame, but realistically, the WA boys dominated. A couple of mishaps laid on for another couple of them who were, coulda, woulda, shoulda. But Connor Fuchs is our man, and he gets to play for all the way from Kalgoorlie. I can't be a bigger rap for this. All the way from Kalgoorlie, he gets to play the Emirates Australian Open in November this year at the Lakes. It could be rubbing shoulders with the likes of Jason Day or Jordan Spieth if they come back. Who knows? What a great reward that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, just phenomenal. So congratulations to Connor, Matty, and all the crew at WA at the moment. They're just kicking goals. I know there's a couple of things you wanted to mention, Blakey, as we clean up a few bits and bobs.
Just a quick one. This may not surprise you, but I think it will interest you, Clayts in particular, and you, Hayesy. In Australian Golf Digest today, they had some, an article on some figures that were done on the driving distance of average players. And this is one of the arguments that some people use against rolling back the golf ball, is that they would argue that it's going to, if you roll back the golf ball for pros, you'll affect the distance that the average amateur player hits it. So in America, they've got an app called Arcos, which tracks the distance through GPS of the average players, and they just got the figures back for the first part of this year, and the average driving distance of the average American player, I presume male, is 217 yards, down from 219 yards in 2015. So, as I said, it wouldn't surprise you. The amateur player's not hitting the ball any further.
Well,
so you're not taking anything away from it. If you roll back the ball, you're not going to take anything away from it.
Well, no one's suggesting they roll back the ball for the average player. My point's always been you take the Iron Byron, which tests the balls. You have a rolled back ball and a modern ball, and you swing it at 80 miles an hour, 81, 82, 83, 84, all the way through to 130, and you see what the difference is. So someone who swings at 80 miles an hour, how far does the ball go with a modern ball and with a proposed rolled back ball? And you're not going to lose 30 yards like Dustin Johnson is going to lose. Dustin Johnson lost 10%.
Yeah,
he loses 30 yards.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean the average player, whatever that is, loses 30 yards.
Yeah.
And it's why I've always thought there should be a bifurcated game where the pros and the top amateurs play with a different ball. But we still need to see the facts about who gains and loses what with the rollback ball versus the current ball. And the other thing is what they don't, again, we're going to bash America again. What the Americans don't understand is we rolled the ball back in 1983 in Australia. In theory, every person who played golf in Australia lost 25 yards when they made the big ball compulsory. Americans don't even know that even happened. They're all crying over there about, they're going to take our yards away. Well, they did it to the rest of the world. I mean, there was no way America was going to come up. There was no way there was going to be a compromise 1.66-inch ball, for example, which is a compromise between the small ball and the big ball. And that wouldn't have been the right thing either. But there was no way the Americans were going to compromise on, or heaven forbid, change to the small ball, which is what the rest of the world used outside of Canada and Mexico and South America. So we all fell in behind them. And every player who played around the world lost, in theory, good players lost up to 25 yards. The average player probably didn't lose anything. And the big ball was easy to chip with. But it's already happened in the world. And the game went on. Yeah. Didn't fall apart.
I just thought about this, Clayts. Maybe that's why the Americans have never gone metric, because they didn't want to lose more yards off their
That's right,
drives.
exactly right, yeah.
Well, you're a bifurcation man, aren't you, Hayesy?
I'm all for bifurcation.
And Jeff Ogilvy spoke about this at the Australian Open last year. He had the most intelligent sort of analysis that I've heard, really, from a player, because he made the point that he's well paid by Titleist to promote the golf balls that he uses, but he also said that he used the example of baseball, where in pro baseball they're allowed to use the aluminium bats there a few years ago, and the stadiums all of a sudden were too small. So if you apply that to golf courses, where are you at if you, and it's where we're at now, is, when your old stadiums, i.e. courses, can't handle the distance that the players hit it. So
madness,
what do you do? Build a new stadium, or do you do something about?
Well, you can keep moving the tees back, but at some point you run out of room to do that. I mean, Augusta are building a fifth tee out in the road, aren't they? Haven't they bought the road behind the fifth hole, and they're building the tee out in the road?
They've got the capacity to do that now, yeah.
So it's just insanity.
Actually, that's one thing where I probably should have put on the table earlier from coming back from Augusta National was the discussion about the 13th hole, because everyone just expects right now that they're going to use the land they brought in the Augusta Country Club next door to take the tee back. There was actually discussion at Augusta National this year, I'm not sure if you guys have heard this, that they might actually, instead of going back, which is obviously at a much greater expense, actually just lower the tee, because there's quite a walk up from the 12th green up to the back where the 13th championship tee is. If they lower that whole tee block, excavate the ground out, so that hitting over the trees is a much more daunting challenge. I'm not sure that'll eventuate, but that was the discussion that was on the table at Augusta.
Yeah, I mean, Fred Ridley spoke about Bobby Jones wanting the second shot to 13 to be a momentous decision, which it was. If you watch the old tapes of through the 70s of Tom Watson and Freddie Couples and Nicklaus hitting 3 irons and 4 woods, and I mean, now with the 5 iron, it's not a momentous decision at all. It's just
and I think if you can take it over the trees, I think one of the years that Bubba Watson won, he went kind of luckily went through the trees and hit something like a wedge. It's ridiculous.
And I need to apologise for my own lack of information. I spoke to Graham Scott at the Australian PGA Tour, who was a referee at Augusta during the Masters, and he actually said to me, he was stationed at the 13th green, and he actually told me, and we sort of said during the broadcast that we being Andy and I, that Patrick Reed's ball was incredibly lucky to stay out of the tributary to Race Creek on the front of the 13th. Yeah. Now, apparently, off camera, that had been happening all week, because they deliberately left a heap more grass on that hill so that they wouldn't do it. So a lot of players were taking advantage of it, especially on Friday or Thursday, maybe to a front pin, that they actually said, oh, well, if we miss it, it's not going to roll back into the water. So Scotty said it was a pretty simple, straightforward up and down to that front pin, and balls were not going in there all week.
It's
so
interesting because the 15th, the hill that runs down the front into the pond of the 15th, all the balls were rolling in there this year. But I've seen years where they've stopped there as well.
Not recently, but 15 is ridiculous. I mean, surely at 13, Patrick Reed's ball should go in, but Sergio's ball shouldn't go in at 15.
Yeah.
I mean, that looks like they've got that completely arse about.
Yeah, no, that's true. Okay, well, so we'll just wrap up a few Australian results around the world. We touched on Brett Rumford earlier, going really well in the Spanish Open. Marcus Fraser, Jason Norris and Jason Scrivener all making the cut there. Good to see Marcus Fraser back in good form. On the China Tour a couple of weeks ago, one we missed out on last week from Augusta, and I apologise for this, particularly to Max McArdle, who's an impressive player from Adelaide. Shot a 66 in the closing round of the China PGA Tour to finish third. Behind China's Yi Chao. Great result for Max, an underrated player and really pushing his claims around the world now. So that's good for him. And Dave Luteris and Kevin Yuan. Good for Kevin Yuan, a young guy from Sydney, to bank a check there as well. Some mixed news from the China Golf Tour. The best name in golf, Blakey, Maverick Antcliffe. Or best name in golf. Closed with a 66 at the Yunnan Open to finish 24th last week. Jack Munro, also of Queensland, finished tied 43rd. Bryden McPherson, our own here on Inside the Ropes, didn't make the cut. But worst news probably, and I haven't got to the bottom of this yet, but Dean Lawson, his fellow Victorian there, withdrew injured, and I believe he's got some sort of wrist or hand injury. So that's probably not what you want as a young golfer. So let's hope that Dean can sort of get that behind him as soon as possible. They move up the road to the Yunnan Classic this week, which is a far bigger result financially if they can do well, and then they get a few weeks off there. We touched on Brooke Henderson, Blakey, but the girls, the Australian girls at the Lotto Championship.
Well, Rebecca Artis finished tied 39, so a made cut there for Rebecca in her first year on the tour. Minjee Lee has been a little bit flat recently. She finished 50th. Suo, I was going to ask you about. Clayts missed the cut. Doesn't seem to be playing that well at the moment.
No, she's not. She struggling. I think she changed clubs last week, which was good. Her caddy and I have been on a mission to get the club she was using out of her bag, which she finally got around to doing. But I think she played better last. She missed the cup. I think she played a bit better. So
she's made changes, hasn't she? There was a lot of changes last year.
I think her swing looks pretty good. So, but she was using a set of clubs that I thought were terrible for her. But
and Hannah Green, Hayesy, is I looked on the what do they call the race to
the Globe,
25th in that already. So in her first full season, I mean, she's doing pretty well.
Yeah, outstanding.
She's made well over $100,000.
We'll speak to Hannah in the upcoming weeks on the podcast. She's it's tremendous what she's doing. And speaking of tremendous, Cam Smith continued his good form after his fifth at Augusta. He didn't go so brilliantly at Hilton Head, but still managed to bank a good check alongside Rod Pampling in a share of 32nd. Aaron Baddeley, 56th. Missed cut for Mark Leishman, which is a bit of a surprise. But, Clayts, I wanted to ask you, one of the people that we had back at Hilton Head from an Australian perspective was John Senden.
Yeah.
First time back on the main tour. He did play one on the web.com a few weeks ago. Missed the cut. Shot a 69 first round and then a 74. It's hard going when you shoot 69 and 74 and miss the cut. But unbelievable to see him back and you know, not surprisingly to see him hitting it well.
Yeah, he's a tremendous player. I think he was one of 3 or 4 guys who'd finished in the top 125 for 15 consecutive years. It's amazing how few players have done that. And he was one of 3 or 4 that had Mickelson, Furyk. So he's a terrific player.
And back from, of course, when we refer to his return, his son Jacob has had a brain tumour, and they've been working away on it. But it's far from remedied permanently, but it's to a place where Jacob can live his life reasonably well, and he's back playing his sport in Texas. And all our best wishes from Australian golf to John Senden and his family, in particular Jacob, as they continue that fight. But great to see Pamps up and about and back on tour. The North Mississippi Classic marks the resumption of the web.com tour this week. Blakey, after a 3-week stint, we've got 4 guys in the mix for the top 25 at the moment. Ryan Gibson, your man.
Ryan he's almost over the line, isn't he? I mean, he's certainly put himself in the.
It's a bit too early to be over the line,
yeah.
But he's definitely in position. Number 10 on the rankings at the moment after the first little break for the year, so he's in position. Brett Druitt at 27, Curtis Luck at 35, and Jamie Arnold from Sydney at number 56 on the rankings. I think they're all in contention. And while we're wrapping up the results, Harrison Endicott did well again this time on the Latino America Tour. His second event, I believe, and he's finished tied 12th at one of my favourite events, Blakey, the 87 Abierto OSDE del Centro.
Outstanding accent there, Hayesy. And Ryan Ruffles played in that event, is that correct?
He did.
It was well back.
54th.
Yeah, he's interesting at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, he needs to do something.
Yeah.
Danny List, I don't know if you guys know much about Danny List. I'm putting my hand up and saying no. He's sort of got he's a bit from England, he's a bit from WA, he's a bit from all over the place. He had shot a fantastic first round. I was thinking, this is great for him. And then suddenly he's disqualified. Don't know what he did in his second round to get disqualified, but after an opening 69, disappointing. Let's hope he can sort of bounce back there. And that pretty much wraps up the bibs and bobs of what Australians are doing around the world. Anything else you guys want to put on the table before we shut up shop?
Not particularly.
My phone's been running hot, Blakey. It just says
really?
It just says Channel 7 on it. That's all. I don't know what else, but I suspect it's the producers of Front Bar.
Oh, they're onto me?
Yeah, well, they were inspired by you on Facebook Live.
Outstanding. Just put them in touch with my manager.
Yeah, no worries. I'll do that as soon as we finish. Clayts, well played. I don't think you got us in any legal issues at all today, which was a remarkable achievement where I thought we were going.
Thanks, mate. Nice work.
Good to have you back in, and we'll get you back. In a few weeks' time, we will have that course ranking sort of special.
Okay, that'll be good. Good.
Hopefully we get Brendan James from Golf Australia magazine and Steve Kuipert from Australian Golf Digest.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah, it should be great. So we'll look forward to your input on that. Blakey, thanks again for your coming off the bench and saving Andy Maher's bacon.
No problem, Hayesy. Enjoyed it.
Thanks. And for all here at Inside the Ropes, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you again next week.